So we begin the reassembly of the Valjoux 7730 in this Ollech Wajs with the fourth wheel and escape wheel, remembering the fourth wheel goes into this little slot here and the pivot drops into the jeweled hole like so. The escape wheel then fits over the top like so. And next is careful fitting of the bridge for these, ensuring that it slides neatly over the extended pivot for the fourth wheel, and will probably require a little bit of jiggling to get the escape wheel in place like so. And this is secured with its single securing screw. So after fitting the new mainspring, lubricating the barrel arbor where it contacts the barrel, using a pair of thick sturdy tweezers, I then test the end shake of the barrel arbor, which is good, it's adequate. There's a little bit of wiggle there. I don't know how visible that will be to you, but there's a tiny bit of wiggle, which is exactly what you're looking for. And next, fit the barrel to the movement and lubricate the barrel arbor with D5. When it's not a jeweled barrel arbor, my preference is to lubricate before fitting, as this will ensure that the oil gets exactly where it needs to be in the barrel arbor hole. With a jeweled barrel arbor, provided there's an adequate oil sink, it's okay to oil after fitting into the oil sink as you would with a pivot. And then the next step is fitting the third wheel which I actually should have done prior to fitting the mainspring barrel. However, we can wiggle that in like so. And then the second wheel, and this again is lubricated with 9010 and is done before fitting. Apologies if that was off screen there. This drops into place, and I just spotted a stray fibre there which I need to grab and remove. Obviously we don't want stray fibres in the movement, and at this point you can just give the barrel a little spin to test that everything is meshing. And with the train of wheels fitted, the next step of course is to fit the barrel bridge. So lubricating the upper barrel arbor with D5, and likewise with the upper second wheel pivot. And before we go ahead and fit the barrel bridge, this is the setting lever screw, and as you can see it's suffered some corrosion. It's usable, it's surface corrosion, and this can be cleaned off. So what I'm going to do to clean this before I go ahead and lubricate and fit it is chuck this in a pin vise and use a fiberglass scratch brush to clean off the corrosion, and then spin it around in the pin vise and clean up the corrosion on the other part of it, on both the upper and lower where the screw head and the shank is. And once that's cleaned up, that will be given a swish around in some alcohol and Rodicode and dried, and then that will be lubricated and fitted. And hopefully you can see here the difference after chucking that and using a scratch brush. It's obviously not going to clean it up so it's super shiny, and in an ideal world this would be replaced. However, it's a component that's not going to be seen at all, and it's not going to hinder its performance. Its sole purpose for being is to hold the setting lever in place. The head of the screw is cosmetically fine, and as I will show you in just a second, as I switch that around to chuck that the other way around, ready to clean the head. So as you can see here, if I can get that focused for you, so you've got the corrosion on the side, but the actual head itself is in fact very clean. So it's not going to be visible, it's not going to hinder the performance, and it will work fine. And with that in place, we can now go ahead and fit the barrel bridge. Just over there, but as you can see that's slotted on, and I can just have a quick check that everything's running freely, which it is. That's nice. And then we secure the barrel bridge with its 3 retaining screws. I've just noticed a little bit of corrosion on the threads of that one, so that's clearly the one that was closest to the keyless works, which is where the very, very small amount of corrosion in this movement exists. So before I fit that one, I'm just going to clean that up and then go ahead and fit it. Same process as I did for the setting lever screw. I'm just going to chuck the head of this into the pin vise and get my brass tweezers, and to chuck the head of this into the pin vise. And just give those threads, whoops, a quick clean up. There is a very small amount of pitting on the threads. It's not too bad, the screw is still usable, but in an ideal world again I would like to replace this. The problem is, while I have screws in my spares collection which are the correct pitch and thread size, I don't actually have any with as nicely finished a domed polished head design, so it would look very out of place. But this is something that could always be replaced at a later date if need be. But that's certainly much better than it was. Quick rinse in alcohol and a blow dry, and then we can go ahead and secure this. Let's check that this setting lever screw rotates freely, which it does. The next step is to fit the ratchet wheel and crown wheel and the click spring and everything accordingly. I will need to remove and lubricate and refit the click, and following this we will lubricate the train of wheels. D5 lubricates the click post. Grease would also be perfectly fine. It has minimal movement, so the lubrication isn't absolutely crucial as long as it has some lubrication so that it's not chewing away at the metal of the base plate, because obviously the click is metal and the base plate is your typical plated brass. Being a softer metal, that would wear away without lubrication, albeit it would take a while because of the very limited movement of the click. There's a small amount of grease is added to the post where the click spring bears. And using a finger or a piece of pegwood, wherever possible, I prefer to use my finger because I feel like I have more control. We pop the little shepherd's crook into the crevice there, and there you can see, oops, how the click operates. Next up is the ratchet wheel. The barrel arbor, of course, has already been lubricated, if you recall. Ensure that it engages correctly with the click. The ratchet wheel screw. A couple of tiny drops of D5 on the underside of the ratchet wheel. This will lubricate it where it rotates and rubs against the barrel bridge, ensuring that any wear is kept to a minimum. D5 once again into the little channel where the securing washer sits, that this rotates around. A little bit of Rodico to pick up the bit in the middle where I caught that with my oiler, where we just don't need it. And then we fit the little surprised Swiss fellow. And pop in his two eyes. The next step in the process is to lubricate the third wheel, fourth wheel and escape wheel pinions with 9-10. Flip that over onto the dial side and we will do the same on the dial side. Moving on to the dial side, we're going to fit the keyless works. Using Mobius H300 I will grease the clutch and winding pinion. An additional note, just before greasing and fitting those two components and the setting lever, these were also de-rusted with a fiberglass brush and cleaned accordingly. And they are the final components that had a little bit of surface corrosion on them. So at some point a small amount of moisture ingress has gotten in through the crown. And it's possible that the stem has previously been replaced because this is a nice shiny new stem. But certainly it's had a little bit of moisture ingress. It could have just been something as simple as condensation because it's all sort of centered around the same area. With the keyless works and the bulk of the time setting components on the dial side, we can move back over onto the movement side, and at this point you can either go ahead and fit the escapement and balance now, or you can assemble the chronograph components and then fit the escape wheel and balance. What I'm going to do is fit the escape wheel, what I'm going to do is fit the pallets, because they are easier to access and oil with the chronograph components not in the way. So I'm going to do that. The risk of damage to them is very, very minimal, because we won't be fitting the driving gear on the extended fourth wheel pivot until the very, very last step. So it doesn't matter if you joggle any of the chronograph components during fitting, because it won't be driving this wheel right here until that driving wheel is pressed on with the staking or jeweling tool. So I can safely go ahead and fit the pallets, and then what I'm going to do additionally, because we've got the base movement assembled, is I've already oiled all the jewels and the arbors and what have you. I'm going to fit the pallets and oil those, and then I'm going to fit and oil the end stones and then the balance, and just check that it's running satisfactorily before I go ahead and fit the chronograph components. I will then remove the balance and pop that aside for safekeeping while I fit the rest of the balance components, because there is always a risk that you can slip and catch the balance and either damage the balance, the pivots, or the hairspring, which is something, of course, that we don't want to do. Oh, there we go, I forgot to press the record button. So there's the pallet fork. Dropped into its pivot. A little bit fiddly and tricky, but it dropped in. I'm going to add a little bit of wind on there. Snapping back and forth very nicely indeed, and now lubricating the faces of the pallet stones. As I've mentioned before, this is not, I just do not have the facility to get anything in close enough while I get myself close enough to do this. Huge amount of respect to the guys who make videos where they can show this step, because if I got the camera close enough and focused, I would obscure it either with my head, my hands, or something like, or wouldn't be able to get myself close enough. This is probably the kind of thing you could do underneath a microscope, which is not something I have. But I'm going to go ahead and lubricate the faces of the pallet stones. At this point here, I'm going to refit the balance. Slide that in nice and steadily. Rotate the movement around. There we go. Using the fine tweezers, and pop open the ink block spring, and then I can drop in the already oiled chaton and capstone. As I said, I've already done on the one on the dial side, so that's looking nice. Bear in mind that's only currently got about half a wine's worth on the barrel, so once I have fitted this, let's bring it in place there, and we give that a wind. It should pick up very nicely indeed, which is always nice to see. And it does indeed. That's looking very, very nice. Such a beautiful movement, this one. I'm going to pop this on the time graph. I just get some initial readings and do a little bit of initial tweaking before removing the balance and going ahead with the chronograph reassembly.